100,000 ants are drowning. Then they stop. Legs hook legs. Jaws lock onto ankles. In under 2 minutes, the dying pile rebuilds itself into a boat. Fire ants do not survive floods. They turn into something that does. So how does an insect that sinks like a grain of sand sail floodwater for weeks without losing its colony? The answer is not teamwork, and the part nobody shows you is what the boat is built out of. Start at the moment the water hits. The mound floods from below, and the soil turns to soup. Most ground insects die inside 10 minutes. Fire ants come boiling up out of the tunnels and do something no engineer taught them. They weave themselves into fabric. Each ant grips its neighbors with hooked claws and mandibles, some holding a dozen or more connections at once, until the swarm stops being a swarm and becomes a sheet. Researchers at Georgia Tech put a stopwatch on it. A full working raft assembles in roughly 100 seconds. Poke it, fold it, tear a hole in it, and it flows shut like a liquid, then holds its shape like a solid. Materials scientists had to borrow a word for it. Viscoelastic. One fire ant dropped in water struggles and drowns. 10,000 of them linked can float for 3 weeks. But floating is the easy part. The disturbing part is happening on the underside. Flip the raft over in your head. There is a bottom layer, pressed face first into the water. And it is alive. Those ants are not drowning, not exactly. Their bodies are coated in a wax that repels water, and when they link tightly enough, they trap a thin silver film of air against their skin, a layer called a plastron, and they breathe from it while submerged. The raft rides on their backs. One scientist leaned over the tank and shoved a raft underwater with a rod to see if it would fail. It sealed itself, held its air, and popped back to the surface dry on top. He came away stung, swollen, and still writing because the numbers in his notebook did not make sense. You would assume the colony runs shifts. Bottom ants rotate up. Top ants rotate down. Everyone shares the misery. Scientists assumed exactly that. Look closer, and the story is stranger. Nobody is steering. That is the twist that flips this whole video. There is no captain, no signal, no order coming from the queen. Each ant is running 2 brutally simple rules. If you feel water, climb. If you feel weight on your back, hold still. That is the entire program. Out of 2 dumb reflexes, repeated 100,000 times, the colony computes a self-healing, unsinkable ship, which means the raft never chose to save anyone. No ant volunteered for the bottom. No ant agreed to be walked on. The structure simply condensed out of the panic, the way a snowflake condenses out of cold air. And once you see that, the question changes. Stop asking how the raft floats. Start asking what it costs. The water answers first. Fish rise under the raft and pick ants off the bottom layer like fruit. Backswimmers stab through the surface film and drag stragglers under. Raindrops hit like artillery, punching individual ants down through the weave. The raft does not flinch. It closes each hole and sails on, sometimes for miles, a living island drifting through drowned neighborhoods. And here is where it stops being nature footage, because after Hurricane Harvey, those islands were photographed floating down the streets of Houston. Wade into floodwater and brush one, and the raft does the one thing it does best. It climbs. Thousands of ants transfer onto your skin in seconds, grip with their jaws, and sting in unison, each one injecting an alkaloid venom that burns like a struck match. A colony that spent days quietly dying will spend you without hesitating. The flood is not the dangerous thing in the flood. So why does any of this work? Why does an animal exist that can be dismembered by fish all night and still function in the morning? Because you have been counting wrong. A fire ant colony is not 100,000 animals. It is one animal that happens to come in pieces. The workers are not citizens of the colony. They are its cells. They cannot breed. Most will die within weeks anyway. And the colony replaces them the way your body replaces skin. When the flood comes, The organism does not sacrifice individuals, because individuals were never the unit that mattered. It sheds its outer layer into the water the way you shed cells into your bathwater. And it feels nothing, because there is nothing there to feel it. And now, hold that up to your own life, because you already live inside one of these. Companies survive recessions by shedding their bottom layer. Cities survive disasters by spending the people closest to the water. Nations float on labor they never have to look at. Every large human structure that outlives a crisis does it the fire ant way. The whole survives because the parts were always considered replaceable. The raft is not an alien miracle. It is an org chart, floating. And the colony has one more secret, the one researchers found when they finally looked at what the raft uses for a foundation. The bottom layer is not only workers. The colony hauls its own brood down there, its eggs, its larvae, its unborn young, and builds them into the base of the ship. It sounds like an atrocity. It is the opposite. Larvae are fat, waxy, and more buoyant than adults, so the young make the best flotation the colony owns. The safest place in the flood, and the most useful, turn out to be the same place, the very bottom holding everything up. The colony rests its entire future on the layer touching the water, and that layer is made of children who will inherit whatever survives. Somewhere tonight, the water is rising on a mound, and 100,000 ants are drowning. They will stop. They will lock together and become a ship, spend their bodies without a vote, and sail their queen and their children to dry ground. Not one of them will understand what they did. Neither do most of the cells that keep a thing like you or a thing like us afloat.